We thank our witnesses for suffering through a business meeting and for being here. They're here to share their expertise on SJ Res 59, legislation recently introduced by myself, Senators Kane, Flake, Coons, Young, and Nelson. The bipartisan legislation would replace the 2001 and 2002 authorizations for the use of military force with an updated AUMF against al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It's a result of years of work and bipartisan negotiations that began in the 113th Congress when I first became ranking member of the committee, and our chairman, I know, pursued this for some time, and we had votes on other AUMFs. I thank him for his efforts in that regard. Since then, we've held at least 7 public full committee hearings on authorizations for the use of military force. Today will be our 4th such hearing on this topic in the last year, and in addition to a classified briefing and a number of other meetings. Since last June, we've heard testimony from legal scholars, policy experts, and secretaries of state and defense twice. During the drafting process, the administration outlined the following principles for any AUMF considered by Congress. Number 1, an AUMF must not sunset. Number 2, it must not be geographically constrained. And number 3, it must be enacted before repeal of the 2001 or 2002 AUMFs. The proposal that is before us, or the one that we're discussing today, adheres to all 3 of those requests. After we introduced our AUMF, we held a full committee discussion with a State Department legal advisor. And I just want to say that meeting, which we held off the record in 116, where we do so much of our discussion, I thought was one of the best discussions we've had on an AUMF. And I think one of the reasons that the ranking member and others have requested that we have the legal scholars we have here today to flesh out some of those issues. In particular, I want to thank Senators Flake, Kane, and Young for their leadership and hard work on this legislation. As we all know, the current administration, just like the Obama administration, believes that it does not need any additional authorization to use force against al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or ISIS. And just for what it's worth, I agree. I agree 100%. I thought the Obama administration had all the legal authority they needed to conduct the operations that were underway. I feel like this administration has exactly the same. But I also believe strongly that Congress should play a greater role in authorizing the use of force by enacting a new AUMF. The current AUMF is nearly 17 years old. There is widespread discontent that Congress has been unable to update it, and there's a high risk that we will do so in an irresponsible manner by simply sunsetting at some point the 01 AUMF. There's also a growing risk, the further we get from September 11, 2001, that the courts could call into question or limit the existing authorization. We should take the opportunity, in my opinion, now, after years of discussion and debate in our committee, to update the current authorities in a responsible manner. The current AUMF requires the administration to trace terrorist groups back to the 9/11 attacks, which involves, let's face it, some legal stretching, as we saw in the justification for the fight against ISIS. This AUMF updates the authority and clearly allows the President to continue the fight, to fight derivatives of terrorist groups as they morph and change their name, whether or not they were around in 2001. Less than 25% of the current members of Congress were here when Congress voted on the 2001 AUMF. As a result, members were able to simply criticize the administration, whichever one happened to be in office at the time, and not bear any responsibility. This AUMF would ensure that Congress remains involved in these decisions, but does not hamstring the administration. Our legislation gives the administration the flexibility necessary to win this fight while strengthening the rightful and necessary role of Congress. And I believe it is the best chance we have to finally address this issue in a constructive way. I want to thank both of our witnesses and the members of this committee for their seriousness on this issue with which they approached the topic before us today. And I hope that together we can have a productive discussion and a way forward. With that, I'll turn to our distinguished ranking member,